Hello everyone, welcome to my Module 3 teaching memo. I am still trying to recover from the fact that Mookie Betts was traded to the Dodgers and Alex Cora was an integral part of the Houston sign-stealing scandal. Will the Red Sox be competitive? Was Alex Cora stealing signs during the 2018 championship season? Do any of you care? I will be traveling to Houston this week for a U.S. prep conference on teacher training. Speaking of Houston, I will attempt to find time to interact with you all as I'm there, but they have a jam-packed schedule for 2 days. I'll be flying out tomorrow and then flying back Friday morning. So, hopefully I will learn some good stuff about teacher training. 24 days left till spring. Yay! Okay, a little housekeeping. As you probably know, you should know, I've graded all your assessment literacy discussion boards. Most seem to be getting the hang of it. As I mentioned in my mid-module memo, APA needs work. Some of you aren't looking at my comments in your upload of your initial post. Even though it says 100 there, everybody gets 100. If you uploaded your initial post, you get 100. So don't look at that and say, oh, I got 100. I don't need to look at those comments. No, it's a pass-fail assignment. Click on your grade, look at the comments. There's a little feedback button at the top. And look at the comments I've made so you won't keep making those mistakes. You can't get an advanced or a proficient in your initial post unless you have correct APA. So you're losing a few points. Not a lot, but you're losing a few points. Okay, you need to cite, you have to remember you need to cite readings in your, or relevant articles in your, or my presentation, which some of you are starting to do, in your response posts, and that's still an issue. So make sure you have at least 4 of those, citations or website or responding to me or responding to my presentation. You also need to make sure you respond to the questions in the discussion board writing prompt. That's why they're there. They're there so you will answer them. But when you answer them, please avoid cutting and pasting quotes. I want to see if you can apply what you are learning, not that you can cut and paste interesting quotes. I want to hear your voice. Now, what does it mean to hear your voice? It means strong opinions and connections supported with evidence. So I want you to respond to the writing prompts, paraphrase what you're reading, and then cite. Don't just cut and paste quotes. Some of you are cutting, pasting quotes in every single paragraph that you write, which doesn't really tell me that you're learning anything other than, oh, here's a good quote. So most of you did okay on the 3 special ed video quizzes that were in Module 2. Almost no one needed or wanted to use the quiz discussion board, and that's fine. Most of you just took it a second time. That exercise was meant to get you used to watching my presentations because many people try to get through the course without watching my presentations. It all comes out in the vocabulary when you hand it in at the end because you don't give the correct definitions. All of them are usually, I might not have all of them, but most of them are in my presentations. I explain them. You can easily put them in your own words and fill it out as we go through the course. I've also noticed some comments on the special ed quiz in Module 3. That was a longer quiz and it also had some EAS questions in it. Canvas does not let you know which matching questions you get correct. You should use the Cohen and Spencer chapter, page 7, to guide you in the differences. Things like large print and reduced number of problems on a page are accommodations. They don't change the criteria of the assessment or of an assignment. You're getting the same information, it's just modified. I mean, it's modified, but it's an accommodation. Large print, it's the same number of, same amount of information, and reduced number of problems on a page. You're still getting 20 questions, it's just that there's only 3 on a page, or 4 on a page. So those are accommodations. Modifications change the criteria. Those are for much more significant disabilities or students that are significantly impaired. The only one you might have a disagreement about, and you can email me on that one if you want, is a CRAN. Is a CRAN an accommodation? Is a CRAN a modification? Or is it neither? The answer I had for the last 2 or 3 semesters, maybe longer, was challenged last semester by a student who proved and had some research to show that it was not the answer that I had. So if you want to challenge me, feel free to email me. There was some activity, as I mentioned, on the special ed quiz discussion board, especially regarding the EAS questions. Now, keep in mind, these are only worth 1 point because the answers are not in my course material. I use them in all my major quizzes. I have probably 4 or 5 in each quiz. So you'll get exposure to the test and the type of questions they use, because those of you who aren't certified or are getting certified in special ed have to pass the EAS. I'm embedding questions, as you should do if you're doing test prep with your students. Embed them during the semester or during the year so they get used to seeing them. Not cram them, throw them at them the last 2 weeks before the test, so they're stressed out. Another reason you're struggling is because these are all reasoning questions. They give you a scenario, different artifacts, and then they ask you questions about them. Lots of them you have to make inferences about them. The answers are not in the material. So these are what you will be writing. You are going to be writing reasoning questions, and you too will struggle. Not only that you're struggling now with answering them, but you'll struggle with creating them. So that's what you have to look forward to in the coming 3 or 4 weeks. All right, progress monitoring. Let's talk about the big ideas of Module 3, which the discussion board is still ongoing, and you have another week to do that. Progress monitoring for response to intervention, which was our topic this week, and is also one of the questions in your final baseline survey. So be filling that out this week. People wrote about research on RTI implementation, article by Sparks 2015, which identified first grade students falling further behind. I agree with one quote in the article. Over time, in many places, what's happening is RTI has been deliberately used as a kind of general education substitution for special education. My strong sense is that over time, more and more kids with greater and greater severity of learning problems are being served in an RTI framework. When I was working as a high school principal, 504 was also used for a similar purpose, giving accommodations to regular ed students. So I'm going to talk about that again in a second. In all sections, in regard to Samaria's progress in continuing Tier 2, despite the fact that according to the dual discrepancy model, having appropriate ROI and reaching the benchmark, she was making adequate progress. Many of you felt she should remain in Tier 2, and that's what I call the empathetic syndrome. We empathize with Zoom. She's doing well. Let's keep her there. And then in one section, and I was really happy to see this, a candidate shared this video whose author, Connor, gave a strong case for terminating Tier 2 services. She stated, quote, "An important thing to remember about RTI is that these tiers are permeable, they're flexible, and that children should be moving between the tiers. We don't want to fall into what we call the tracking trap, which I call the empathy syndrome. That means that children are put in Tier 2 and they are left in Tier 2 all year long, when Tier 2 may not be the best place for them." In one section, I question whether the paired reading strategy used by Mrs. Buchanan in the Charles scenario in Salvia et al. was a research-based strategy. Turns out as well as several other fluency strategies that I have a link to in my transcript from Jim Wright, Intervention Central guru, including one suggested by a candidate, which I was unfamiliar with, duet reading. And I have a video example, which was also shared by a candidate, in my transcript. The issue of ELLs and RTI was mentioned in this article, which I have a link to in my transcript. There are several recommendations at the end of the article, and well worth reading and incorporating into your pedagogical bag of tricks. I'm always trying to fill up that bag. One of interest to me was, quote, school personnel do not delay literacy instruction until students' English literacy skills are well developed, but instead support learning while promoting English language development. This, I believe, is motivated by a common misconception. The Progress Monitoring Discussion Board will continue through the next module. While the pressure was on the first person in each group to do the graphing and computing slope of ROI, it gave everyone some practice on how RTI decision making can be empirical as opposed to whimsical. Oh yes, I think they should be taken out of Tier 2, or we should keep them in Tier 2. As it was, some were still anxious to either claim progress was good when it wasn't, or the student should be referred to the next tier when they were making adequate progress or not enough interventions had taken place. Good lessons to be learned from this exercise. Response to intervention is one of the most important topics covered in the special education portion of this course. I should say response to intervention progress monitoring process, because it pertains equally as much to regular ed teachers as to special ed personnel. In the discussion board, you need to indicate an understanding of the process from the 7 basic assumptions in Salvia et al., universal screening, research-based classroom curriculum, intervention fidelity and integrity, progress monitoring through the use of CBMs and the definition of what a CBM is, rate of improvement, ROI, gap analysis, frequency versus specificity, and progression through the tiers of interventions. Now, all of these things have been mentioned by some of you, so you should be familiar with all these terms, which are very important parts of RTI. One final reminder, make sure you watch my assignment video and my Creating the Learning Targets videos. They should help in clarifying our learning target discussion, which is our next module, Module 4. I will be back from Houston, and I will talk to you again next Monday.